Hello everyone, welcome to this information theory lecture. My name is Sahasranand. I'm a PhD student at the Department of ECE, Indian Institute of Science. In this short lecture, we shall discuss data compression. In particular, we'll look at the information theoretic aspects of compression and derive bounds on the codeword lengths of optimal codes for almost lossless compression and lossless compression. Data compression is ubiquitous. We are able to view a photograph or a movie with pretty much all perceptible details intact in formats that take up less storage space. Or we are able to enjoy music that lasts for hours together and comprises multiple layers of sounds from a file that is compressed to a few megabytes. In simplistic terms, all of these involve lossy compression, usually via transforms and quantization, followed by lossless compression of the output. We are also familiar with programs that compress text documents, books, or files lossless. We are interested in the lossless compression problem, and we look at it from an information theoretic viewpoint. So here is the mathematical framework in which we'll operate. There is this source model. The source emits these symbols x1, x2, etc., xn, where each of the xi's belong to a set called the source alphabet script x, which is finite. So some examples are set 0, 1, or the set of the outcomes of two tosses of a coin, or the English alphabet, or uh, all the m-bit sequences. Now we are interested in the following question. What is the least number of bits sufficient to store these outcomes x1 through xn? Let us look at an example. Say the script text, the alphabet is all the collection of all 10-bit sequences. So there are 2 to the 10 of them, 1024 of them. And this has a distribution px such that we observe the outcome all zeros with probability 0.495, and we see an all one sequence with a probability 0.495, and the remaining 1% is equally distributed among all the other possible 10-bit sequences. Now, what is the minimum number of bits for storing an outcome from this source such that we recover each symbol exactly? So if we want to recover every symbol exactly, then we have nothing much to do because these are all 10-bit sequences. We have to use 10 bits to represent all of them so that we can recover all of them. But if we allow a probability of error, say 0.01, meaning we allow ourselves to be wrong 1% of the time, then using just one bit, if we represent the all zero sequence using a single zero bit, and the all one sequence using a single one, and the rest of the sequences using either a 0 or a 1, then 99% of the time we are right. We can actually decode to the actual symbol that occurred. So we are only making an error which is less than or equal to 0.01. So this illustrates that by looking at the probability distribution and by allowing a certain probability of error, we can actually do much better than the case when we are asked to recover each symbol exactly. So this will be the focus of our study. Let's look at a few formal definitions before we get there. The discrete source x is a random variable which has a probability mass function, and x takes values in a finite set called the source alphabet. A block source code of length L is this tuple f comma phi, where f is a compression mapping which maps the alphabet to L-bit sequences, and phi is a decompression mapping which maps these L-bit sequences back to the original alphabet, union this special symbol which stands for error. So the decompression mapping thinks that it cannot decode any alphabet, any valid symbol in this alphabet, then it outputs is allowed to output an error symbol. The schematic looks like this. The source x generates a symbol little x. which is passed through this compression mapping, which outputs an L-bit sequence. This is then stored or transmitted, and then using this L-bit sequence, this decompression mapping has to figure out what was the original symbol that got compressed. So it outputs a symbol X hat, which is in this alphabet union this error symbol. It can either say one of these or it can say an error has occurred. So how do we evaluate how well this performs? The metric that we use is probability of error. So the probability of error for this source code f comma phi is given by E of f comma phi, which is defined as the probability that the X hat that this decompression mapping outputs is not equal to the original symbol that the source produced. This is also same as probability that p applied to f of x does not produce x back. This we can write as this, where this is summation over all symbols, probability of the symbol times indicator that that symbol was not recovered exactly. Now given an epsilon between 0 and 1, we denote by L epsilon of x the minimum length of a source code f comma phi with probability of error less than or equal to epsilon. So here we are looking for source codes f which maps to L lengths, L bit sequences, and the minimum such L that is denoted as L epsilon of x. So here we can see that we want to keep this error probability of error less than or equal to epsilon. From this expression, what this expression suggests is that if we can ensure that this indicator is not 1 on the symbols whose combined probability is less than epsilon, meaning for all those symbols whose, so this should be 1 only on those symbols whose combined probability is less than or equal to epsilon. If we can ensure that, then E of f comma phi is going to be less than or equal to epsilon. So let's see formally how that can be done. So let A be the set where which is the collection of all those symbols where we decode correctly. So phi of f of x is equal to x itself. Then clearly we make an error outside this set. So probability of error E of f comma phi is 1 minus probability of A. So to ensure that the probability of error is less than or equal to epsilon, we need to build the set A where we decode correctly such that probability of A is greater than or equal to 1 minus epsilon. So if we do that, then this error probability is less than or equal to epsilon. And we use this compression mapping such that we represent all the symbols in A losslessly, and we need roughly log of cardinality of A, L to be log of cardinality of A to do that. So how to construct such an A? That is a question. So consider this source which outputs these symbols A, B, C, D, etc. up to J, and say they have probabilities given by this. A has probability 0.2, B has probability 0.1, etc. So now we want to construct an A such that probability of A is greater than or equal to 1 minus epsilon. Here we take epsilon to be 0.05, for example. So we want A such that probability of A is greater than or equal to 0.95. So here is a strategy. We sort the elements in the decreasing order, non-increasing order of their probabilities, and we start collecting all those symbols into the set A until the point where the probability of A reaches 0.95, and then encode only those symbols. So first we put this little a into the set A. Now probability of A is 0.2. Now we add the symbol E. Now probability of A is 0.4. We add the symbol I. Probability is 0.55. Add B. Add C. Now probability has reached 0.75. And add D, G, and H. So now we have reached 0.95. So we don't even need to care about these two symbols F and J. And we'll only losslessly represent all these symbols. If we do that, we can actually recover all of these losslessly, and we will not make an error which is more than 0.05. So how many bits do we need to represent the symbols in the set A? There are 8 of them. So we can do this using 3 bits. So L is log 2 to the base 2 of cardinality of A, which is 3. So here I have written log to the base 2. We'll use just log to denote log to the base 2 from here on. So here we have obtained the number of bits needed to represent these symbols and ensure that probability of error is 0.05. But what can we say about this L in terms of the probability of the symbols in the set A itself? We can't say much from this scheme. Let us look at an alternative scheme. So say we collect all those symbols into the set A for which the probability of occurrence of that symbol is greater than or equal to 2 to the minus lambda for some parameter lambda. So let's construct such an A. So A has all those symbols for which the probability of that symbol is greater than or equal to 2 to the minus lambda. So then our task boils down to identifying a lambda such that this set A has probability greater than or equal to 1 minus epsilon. What is great about this alternative scheme is that we can actually characterize the number of bits needed to store this set A in terms of this lambda, meaning in terms of the probabilities of the symbols in the set itself. So let us see how that is done. So if you sum all the probabilities of the symbols in A, that is anyway less than or equal to 1, because the total probability itself is less than or is equal to 1. Now this px of x is greater than or equal to 2 to the minus lambda for all x in A, because that is how A itself was constructed. So we can write this inequality, and this becomes cardinality of A times 2 to the minus lambda. So from this we can write that L, which is the number of bits using which we represent all the elements in A, log of cardinality of A, is less than or equal to lambda. So such a representation is actually will turn out to be useful, as we'll soon see. In other words, what we are trying to do here is that we are trying to characterize the minimum number of bits which is sufficient to store a set which has probability greater than or equal to 1 minus epsilon. In other words, we are trying to characterize what L epsilon of x is. So can we do it using this kind of a strategy? So recall that L epsilon is the minimum L such that we can build a source code with probability of error less than or equal to epsilon. So what this lemma says is that if you can construct a set such that the probabilities of the symbols in that set is greater than or equal to 2 to the minus lambda, just like what we did now, and ensure that its probability is greater than or equal to 1 minus epsilon, then L epsilon of x itself will be less than or equal to lambda plus 1, this lambda here. So this can also be thought of in this fashion. If we can find a large probability set where it collects all the symbols for which minus log px is less than or equal to lambda, then L epsilon of x will also be less than or equal to lambda plus some extra term. So a large probability upper bound on minus log px. In fact, that upper bound itself provides an upper bound for L epsilon. That term itself provides an upper bound for L epsilon of x also. So the proof proceeds almost exactly as what we saw in the previous slide. So I'll leave it to you to check. So now we have obtained an upper bound on L epsilon of x. We would like to get a lower bound on L epsilon of x as well. And if we can bring them close together, then we can ensure we can get a sufficiently good characterization of L epsilon of x for any source x. So let's try to get a lower bound. So lemma 2 says that if you can find a large probability lower bound on minus log px, then you can obtain a lower bound on L epsilon of x as well. in terms of the same parameter lambda here. So here we have in the previous lemma 1, we said we put a large probability upper bound on minus log px and we obtained an upper bound on L epsilon of x. Here we put a large probability lower bound on L epsilon on log minus log px and we obtain a lower bound on L epsilon of x. So let's see how this can be proved. So what we want to show is that given a source code Fe of length L and probability of error less than or equal to epsilon, we want to show that L is greater than or equal to lambda minus log 1 by 1 minus epsilon minus delta. So if this is true for every source code which incurs a probability of error epsilon and has length L, so if this is true for every such source code, then L epsilon x is the minimum L among those. So then for that also this should hold, this bound should hold. So then we'll get the result. This is what we are seeking. Now let A be the set where for any such source code we decode correctly. The collection of symbols where we decode correctly. Let A be such a set, and let probability of A be greater than or equal to 1 minus epsilon. So then indeed L the number of bits has to be greater than or equal to log of cardinality of this set. So this is true. Now let us define B to be the set in the statement of the lemma, which is that all the symbols for which minus log px is lower bounded by lambda. And by our assumption, we assume that this set has probability greater than or equal to 1 minus delta. We said if there is a set like this and if there is a lower bound on the probability of that set, then we can say there is a lower bound on L epsilon. That was the statement. So this is from the assumption. So using these two, we can say that probability of A intersection B is actually, which is equal to probability of A plus probability B minus A union B. And this probability of A union B, we upper bound by 1, we obtain this second expression. And probability of A is greater than or equal to 1 minus epsilon from here. And probability of B is greater than or equal to 1 minus delta from here. And putting these together, we get 1 minus epsilon minus delta. So 1 minus epsilon minus delta is less than or equal to probability of A intersection B. So let's carry these two boxes forward. And let's open this second box. So 1 minus epsilon minus delta is actually less than or equal to sum of all the probabilities of the symbols in A intersection B. Now, all these symbols are also in B. But recall that in B, minus log px is greater than or equal to lambda. In other words, px is less than or equal to 2 raised to minus lambda. So we can actually write px of x is less than or equal to 2 raised to minus lambda here. So this gives 2 raised to minus lambda times cardinality of A intersection B. So from this we can say that cardinality of A intersection B is actually greater than or equal to 2 raised to lambda times 1 minus epsilon minus delta. But cardinality of A itself is greater than or equal to cardinality of A intersection B. And from this box above, we know that L is greater than or equal to log of cardinality of A. So that is also greater than or equal to log of this quantity. So log of this quantity, which is lambda minus log 1 by 1 minus epsilon minus delta. So now we have obtained upper and lower bounds for the length, minimum length for representing any source X. So now we would like to evaluate this for a particular kind of source, which is called a discrete memoryless source. So to do that, we'll use the following theorem, which is known as weak law of large numbers. This says that for independent and identically distributed Z1 through Zn, all with common distribution Pz, for any t positive and for every epsilon between 0 and 1, the probability that the sum of these random variables deviates from n times the mean, the common mean, by more than nt, where the t is this one, that probability is less than or equal to epsilon for n sufficiently large. So as you collect more and more samples, in other words, as you collect more and more samples, the average of these random variables differing from their mean will not be more than by more than t, that probability is going to be less than or equal to epsilon. So we'll use this theorem to say something about the minimum length of a source code for a discrete memoryless source. So discrete memoryless source is denoted DMS, is xn of length n, and it just consists of these n tuples of symbols x1 through xn, where each of the xi's are from the alphabet x, and the probability, the joint probability of this x1 through xn is given by the product of the individual probabilities, each with the same distribution. So these x1 through xn's are actually independent and identically distributed with common distribution px. So for this, we can write minus log pxn of xn is equal to sum of I equal to 1 to n minus log px of xi, because of this particular structure. Now let us denote this random variable minus log px of capital Xi to be zi. Now from weak law of large numbers, we know that the sum of these random variables minus n times their mean is less than or equal to nt with big probability, with probability greater than 1 minus epsilon. So here the summation zi will be summation minus log px of xi, which in turn is minus log pxn of xn. So we can actually write probability minus log pxn of xn minus n times expectation of z is less than or equal to nt with high probability. So now we can write this expression in this form, where we say that minus log pxn of xn is less than or equal to some quantity is greater than or equal to 1 minus epsilon. So this reminds us of lemma 1, where we said minus log probability of the source is random variable, the source random variable is less than or equal to some lambda. If that has probability greater than or equal to 1 minus epsilon, then L epsilon for representing that source is less than or equal to this lambda plus 1, which is exactly what we get. So L epsilon for representing the source xn is less than or equal to this lambda, which is n times expression z plus t plus 1. And again, from this weak law of large numbers statement, we can also write for this is for epsilon, we can write it for delta also, because this is true for every epsilon for sufficiently large n. We can write it for delta also. And there, what we were saying was that if we have this lower bound on minus log probability of this source random variable in terms of which is greater than or equal to lambda, then we can say that L epsilon of the source is greater than or equal to lambda minus log 1 by 1 minus epsilon minus delta, so which is what we obtain here. So this is like putting an upper and lower bound on the minimum length of a source code for representing the source xn. So now recall that xn is like xn is an ln symbol sequence. So here we have calculated what is the length of the source code for this n symbol sequence. So what about per symbol? So can we say something about the number of bits needed to represent this sequence on a per symbol basis? So for that, we define what is called a rate. So a source code of rate r with probability of error epsilon is nothing but a length L equal to nr source code for the DMS, discrete memoryless source xn, with probability of error less than or equal to epsilon. So a rate r is just a number. So a number is achievable, is epsilon achievable if we can actually construct a source code of rate r greater than 0 of this form with probability of error epsilon. Meaning, if we can construct a source code with length L equal to nr and incur a probability of error less than or equal to epsilon, then that r is achievable. R is said to be achievable. This is the definition of this epsilon achievable rate. And the infimum over all epsilon achievable rates is denoted by R epsilon star. So if we recall the definition of L epsilon, R epsilon star is nothing but 1 by n L epsilon of xn, because L epsilon is the length of the source code for representing a DMS xn, the minimum length of a source code for representing a DMS xn, such that we incur a probability of error less than or equal to epsilon. So R epsilon star is nothing but the same, but with in terms of rate. So we just divide by n to get R epsilon star. Further, we define R star to be the limit as epsilon goes to 0, meaning we drive the error to 0 and look at what is the minimum rate. So using the bounds that we have obtained, we will actually show that for a discrete memoryless source with common distribution P, for every epsilon, R epsilon star is actually equal to this expression here, summation x in x, P of x log 1 by P of x. So since this right hand side does not depend on epsilon itself, we can actually set epsilon, let epsilon go to 0. And so R star is also equal to this expression here. So how do we prove this? So recall that R epsilon star is 1 by n L epsilon of xn. And using the upper and lower bound on L epsilon of xn, we obtain this expression here, where this expectation z is minus log P of x. And now we take n to infinity and P is arbitrary. So from that we obtain R epsilon star is indeed equal to expectation of z. So expectation of z is nothing but this quantity here, summation P of x minus summation P of x log P of x is written in this form. So here this is an instance of what is called a coding theorem. So R epsilon star or R star are quantities which are operational, meaning these are the rates of the codes that we would like to build. But what we have on the right hand side is a mathematical quantity. So this theorem relates an operational quantity to a mathematical quantity. So such a theorem is called a coding theorem. And this mathematical quantity is called Shannon entropy. It is denoted by this h of p, summation px log 1 over px. It is also sometimes denoted h of x, where x is distributed as this p. So this is an important quantity in information theory, and we will occur again and again in various scenarios. So this brings us to the end of the discussion on almost lossless source coding, where we characterize the minimum length for representing a source such that we incur a probability of error epsilon, and we got upper and lower bounds for that expression for L epsilon of x, and we then used it to show upper and lower bounds for a source which is a discrete memoryless source. So we obtained upper and lower bounds for L epsilon of xn, and using that we could show that the rate of a source code is actually equal to this mathematically calculated quantity, which is called Shannon entropy. Now we'll look at lossless compression. So far we were looking at almost lossless compression. We allowed an error of epsilon, and we then let epsilon go to 0 and asked what is the rate, etc. Now we look at lossless compression, meaning the probability that x is not equal to p of f of x, that probability is equal to 0. So far the previous section what we looked at was this, where x outputs a symbol little x, which passes through a compression mapping, which maps it to an L-bit sequence, which is stored, and then from this L-bit sequence you obtain an x hat. So now what we'll look at is, again it is same as before here, where it outputs a symbol x, and this compression mapping maps it to 0 1 star, meaning it maps it to all possible 0 1 sequences, not just L-bit sequences. So these can be variable length sequences. So these sequences can have different lengths. That is allowed here. The other feature is that the output of phi is not allowed to phi is not allowed to say, oh I don't know, it is an error. That is not allowed. It has to output a symbol x hat, which is in this alphabet. Further, we also want to say that probability of x not equal to x hat is equal to 0. So this is the lossless variable length compression setting. So how do we achieve this? So we can build codes which are broadly called non-singular codes. A code f comma phi is non-singular if f is 1 to 1 and phi is f inverse. So such a code is called non-singular code. So from here on we'll be only discussing non-singular codes, and in the context of non-singular codes it suffices to say a code f we need not say phi because phi is always F inverse. Let us look at an example. Say this source alphabet A, B, C, D is mapped in a 1-1. So this means it is mapped in a 1-1 fashion, 1-to-1 mapping to these code words. So since all these code words, since there are 4 of them here and there are 4 of them here, we can actually recover ABCD with no error. So this code is non-singular. Another example is ABCD being mapped to 0, 1, 0, 1, 1, 0, 1, 1, 1. Notice that the lengths of the code words are different here. But again, these are all distinct. And if we do a distinct mapping, we can again recover all of them. Yet another example is this, where we map ABCD to 0, 1, 0, 1, 1, 1. Again, these are variable. The lengths of the code words are different, but they are all distinct. So we can again recover. This is non-singular. However, if we were to consider sequence of these source alphabets, if we have a sequence of source alphabets, and if we use this code to represent each of the symbol, then can we actually recover the original sequence? So suppose you are given this encoding 0011 without any extra punctuation separating two symbols. If you are given this encoding, what can we decode it to? We can decode it as 0, 0, 1, 1. These are all valid code words, right? So if we had actually mapped A to 0, B to 1, C to 0, 1, and D to 1, 1, then this will be read as A, C, B. But it is as well valid to decode this sequence as 0, 0, 1, 1, meaning it can be decoded as A, B, B, or it can be decoded as A, D, meaning all these sequences produce the same encoding 0011. So while this code is non-singular for a single use, if we use this one after the other concatenated, the code words concatenated, then it is not non-singular. So this concatenation is known as extension. So this is the 4th extension of this code word. So the kth extension for any general k, that is not non-singular in general. So if we want to ensure that all these kth extensions also have to be non-singular, so this is practically useful, right? If we are going to send a sequence of symbols, we should be able to represent them using these code words alone without using any extra punctuation to say, okay, it is either this or this or this. So if we desire such a property in the code, such a code is called a uniquely decodable code. So a uniquely decodable code f comma phi, I should say, I need to say only f, is uniquely decodable if for all k the encoder, if you consider this encoder which takes as input x1 through xk, that is not, if that encoder is of this form where you stack the code words next to each other without any punctuation. So this comma is just for readability. If you stack the code words next to each other without any punctuation, if that code is non-singular, if the kth extension of f is non-singular, that is called uniquely decodable. So this is a smaller class of codes which are non-singular, which sits here. Let us look at an example. So here, say ABCD is mapped to 0, 0, 1, 0, 1, 1, 0, 1, 1, 1. And we get an encoding like this, suppose. So how do we decode? So when we see a 0, we cannot decode. But when we see the next 0, we can be sure that the first 0 we saw was corresponding to A. Suppose they are mapped in the same order. Then again, we see this 0. We cannot now say if it is A or without looking at the next one. Now we have seen 0, 1. Even after seeing 0, 1, we can't be sure. But when we see the next 0 here, we know for sure that it was indeed 0, 1 and not 0, 1, 1 or 0, 1, 1, 1. So this 0, 1 is B. And then next one, you see the 0, you can't say anything. 1, you can't say anything. 1, you can't say anything. Once you see this 0, then you can be sure that, okay, this was indeed 0, 1, 1. And it was C. So in this fashion, we can actually decode this uniquely. So all the kth extensions are non-singular. There is no other sequence which will produce such an encoding. So it is uniquely decodable. But notice that we were not able to decode it as soon as we saw a code word. We saw this code word, for instance, here we saw the code word 01, but we could not decode it to B because we had to wait to see if a 1 follows it or not. If it did, like it did in this case, the code word, the symbol was not B, it was C instead. So it is not instantaneously decodable. While it is uniquely decodable, it is not instantaneously decodable. So the codes that allow us to do that, to instantaneously decode, are called prefix-free codes. So prefix-free codes are those codes for which no code word in the set of code words is a prefix of some other code word, meaning it does not appear at the beginning of some other code word. So once you see a code word, you can be sure that it is indeed that and it is not some first part of some other code word. So you can instantaneously decode. For example, if you map this ABCD in the same order to this 0, 1, 0, 1, 1, 0, 1, 1, 1, then once you see the 0, you can be sure it is A. Next 0, again A. Then you see 1, 0, it is B. Then you see 1, 1, 0, which is C, and so on. So soon as we complete seeing a code word, we can actually decode. These are called instantaneously decodable codes or prefix-free codes. So we have just seen this. Another example is to map this alphabet in a one-to-one fashion to these sequences. So notice that these are also prefix-free in that none of the code words are a prefix of any other code word, but also that these all have the same length too. So these are fixed length codes that we see in this figure. These are a subset of prefix-free codes. So we have all these different classes of codes, and we said this. Some of these are motivated by practical considerations. But how do we evaluate these codes? How good are they? How do we measure the performance? So the metric that we use is the average length of a code or the expected length of the code, which is expectation of L of f of x, where f of x is the code word for the symbol x and L is its length. This is a binary sequence, so number of bits, L of f of x, and the expected value of that, because these are all variable length codes and x occurs with some probability, so expectation taken over that probability of L of f of x, that is the average length of this code. So like before, we'll define the minimum expected length here. There we talked about minimum source code length. Here we'll talk about minimum expected length, where f is such that the probability that you make an error is 0, meaning you actually exactly decode is 1. In other words, f is non-singular. So L0x is the minimum expected length where f is a non-singular code. So L0 unique is the minimum expected length of a code f where f is uniquely decodable. L0 prefix of x is the minimum expected length of a prefix-free code f. So from the figure, we can say this relation, which is that L0 of the minimum expected length for a non-singular code is always less than or equal to the minimum expected length for a uniquely decodable code, because these uniquely decodable codes are also part of this set of non-singular codes. So here we are taking minimum over a larger set. So this has to be smaller, less than or equal to this. Similarly, this is also true. So this relation we know, but can we relate these? So again, these are operational quantities. So these are defined in terms of expected length of the codes that we build. So can we relate these again to some mathematical quantities like before? So the inequality that will help us do that for some of these is Kraft-Macmillan inequality, which says that for a uniquely decodable code f, if we set Lx to be the lengths of the code words, then these lengths satisfy this Kraft-Macmillan inequality, which is that the sum over all the symbols 2 to the minus Lx is less than or equal to 1. So this holds true for uniquely decodable codes. So obviously it should hold for prefix-free codes also, which are actually a subset of uniquely decodable codes. Conversely, if you are given any set of positive numbers, positive integers, which satisfy this Kraft-Macmillan inequality, then we can actually construct a prefix-free code with code word lengths equal to these numbers. So the implication of this converse part is that we can actually forget about all uniquely decodable codes that are not prefix free, because given any uniquely decodable code with a set of length lx, they satisfy this inequality, and any set of lengths that satisfy this inequality, out of that we can construct a prefix free code. So we just need to look at prefix free codes. So now let us try and prove this theorem. We'll first prove the first part. We'll consider a uniquely decodable code, and we show that the lengths satisfy this inequality. So let C be a uniquely decodable code with code word length Lx. Let Lmax be the maximum of those code word lengths. Then for the kth extension of C, namely you stack the code words for x1 through xk and call this x underbar to be the collection x1 through xk, the vector x1 through xk. In this case, if you look at what is 2 raised to minus L of fk of x and sum it over all possible k symbol sequences. So what is this L of f of x, fk of x? It is asking what is the length of this fk of x. So what all values this can take? So suppose this takes a value m, we actually count the number of code words which has length m in this kth extension, and that times 2 raised to minus m. That is this expression. But what all values can this m take? So m is the length of the code word, right, in the kth extension. So in the kth extension, m can take values. So at least it can take value 1. It need not, but it can take from 1 onwards. And the maximum it can go up to is k times L max, because this is just concatenation of k codes, codes which are uniquely this code C. And for this code, maximum is L max. So each of these can take a length of maximum L max. So there are k of them. So the maximum is k times L max. So this summation is true. Now, for a uniquely decodable code, the kth extension has to be non-singular. So the number of code words here, a of m, that has to be less than or equal to 2 raised to m. Because if there were more, if we were actually representing more than 2 to the m sequences using code words of length m, then some of them we cannot invert. So that code would not be non-singular. But for a uniquely decodable code, kth extension has to be non-singular. So this has to hold true. A of m has to be less than or equal to 2 to the m. So this expression actually becomes, this summation is less than or equal to KL max, because you can upper bound this using 1, and this is true. So let's keep this aside. Now again we look at this sum over all k symbol sequences 2 to the minus L of fk of x. So what is this length? This is just the sum of lengths of these individual code words. So we just write it in that fashion, and we take the summation outside and write it as a product. So what is this doing? We actually iterate over all k symbol, all k tuples of symbols coming from this alphabet x, and taking 2 raised to minus the length of the code words. So we are doing this over all possibilities. So we can actually write this as summation over x in x 2 to the minus lx times k. You can actually check if this is true. So we get another expression relating this quantity to another quantity. We have these two. So now we can write the summation x in x 2 to the minus lx to be less than or equal to k raised to 1 by k L max raised to 1 by k. Now if we let k go to infinity, this quantity is equal to 1. So we have shown that the lengths are actually less than or equal to 1 for a uniquely decodable code. So now we come to part 2 of Kraft-Milne inequality, which says, for part 1 said for uniquely decodable codes, the length satisfy this particular inequality here. Part 2 says if you are given a set of positive integers which satisfy these this inequality, then there exists a prefix free code. We can construct a prefix free code such that these numbers are the lengths of code words. So let us try and construct such a code. So we construct the code as follows. Assume that we can order these L1, L2 in this fashion: 1 less than or equal to L1 less than or equal to L2. Then 0 is greater than or equal to 2 to the minus L1, greater than 2 to the minus L2, etc. Now define these this real valued these values a1, a2, etc., where a1 is 0, A2 is equal to 2 to the minus L1, A3 is A2 plus 2 to the minus L2, A4 is A3 plus 2 to the minus L3, and so on. And for the symbol I, let the encoding be the first Li bits in the binary expansion of AI. Notice that these AIs are all less than or equal to 1 because of Kraft-Macmillan inequality. So f of I be the first Li bits in the binary expansion of AI. Now we will show that this encoding is actually a prefix-free encoding. We will prove by contradiction. So we suppose that f of I is the prefix of f of j, where j is greater than I, because these are ordered in this fashion. So f of I is the prefix of f of j. So because of this construction, this means that they agree on the most significant Li bits. Because f of I is the prefix of f of j means the first Li bits are the same as in f of j also. So the difference between aj and ai has to be less than or equal to, has to be strictly less than 2 to the minus Li. Because they agree on the first Li bits, the difference has to be strictly less than 2 to the minus Li. However, by construction, we know that aj minus ai is equal to 2 to the minus Li plus all these terms. So it is greater than or equal to 2 to the minus Li. So this is a contradiction. So indeed, the code that we constructed is prefix free. We started off with lengths which satisfy this inequality, and we could construct a prefix free code. So let's see how we can use this inequality to get a handle on this L0 prefix of x, which is the minimum expected length of a prefix free code. So let Lx be the code word length of a prefix free code for x distributed as p. Then the average code word length is this expression here, the expected length. So let's calculate what is this expected length minus h of x, where h of x is the entropy. Let's calculate what this is. So we can write out Lx as log 1 by 2 to the minus Lx, and entropy definition is px log 1 by px. We can take this px here and we can write in this fashion. Now using log sum inequality, we can write this summation as summation px log summation px by this summation, and this summation is 1. Again, the summation, the numerator is also 1. So we obtain log 1 by summation x and x 2 to the minus Lx. So this is again the left side of the Kraft-Macmillan inequality. And for a prefix-free code, this is less than or equal to 1. So this whole quantity is greater than or equal to 0, which in turn tells us that the average code word length for any prefix-free code is greater than or equal to h of x. So for any prefix-free code, if it is greater than or equal to h of x, this infimum must also be greater than or equal to h of x. So from that we obtain L0 prefix of x is greater than or equal to h of x. So we have obtained a lower bound on L0 prefix. So can we get an upper bound as well? So let's try to do that. So for x distributed as p, consider the following length assignment: Lx, which is the ceiling, the smallest integer greater than or equal to log of 1 by p of x. So a code which has these length assignments is called a Shannon code. So for a Shannon code, also the Kraft-Macmillan inequality is satisfied. So Shannon codes are actually prefix-free codes. So we can build prefix-free codes in this fashion. So we can actually check that it satisfies the Kraft-Macmillan inequality, because it follows from this. You consider the sum of 2 raised to minus Lx. Since Lx is greater than or equal to log 1 by px, 2 to the minus Lx is less than or equal to px, and this summation is less than or equal to 1. So Kraft-Macmillan is satisfied. So this is indeed a prefix-free code. And let us calculate the expected value. So expectation turns out to be less than or equal to h of x plus 1, because this ceil can be upper bounded by log 1 by px plus 1. So we can get this expression. So for this particular construction, we could get the expected length to be less than or equal to h of x plus 1. So the minimum has to be less than or equal to this, whatever we got out of this construction. So we can say that L0 prefix of x is less than or equal to h of x plus 1. So we have in fact obtained an upper and a lower bound for L0 prefix of x, where this is the minimum expected length of a prefix free code. By virtue of the Kraft-Macmillan inequality, we can also say this, where L0 unique of x, which is the minimum expected length of a uniquely decodable code, also sits between these two quantities here. Now recall this diagram where we said there is this class of non-singular codes within which these sit. And we could say upfront that L0 of x, the minimum expected length of a non-singular code, is less than or equal to L0 unique, which was less than or equal to L0 prefix, but we showed it is equal to. So this much we have obtained. Now we are asking, can non-singular codes do better? In other words, we want to characterize L0 of x, which is the minimum expected length of a non-singular code. So we are actually asking, where does this L0 of x sit in this characterization? Does this sit to the right of h of x, to the left of h of x? Does it equal any of these quantities, etc.? So let us try and do that. So we'll try to get an upper bound on L0 of x. Towards that, we first arrange the PMF in the non-increasing order, P1 through Pm, and consider this following code word assignment. Look at the first two columns. So symbol I and code word f of I. Symbol 1 is mapped to an empty code word, 2 is mapped to bit 0, 3 is mapped to bit 1, 4, 5, 6, 7 are mapped to these 2-bit sequences. So the lengths are 0, 1, 1, 2, 2, 2, etc. and so on. Now we can see, we have also written this 2 to the minus Li for these, for length 0, 2 to the minus Li, 1 and half, etc. So you can right away see that this does not satisfy the Kraft-Macmillan inequality. So this code is neither prefix free nor uniquely decodable. But this is non-singular because these mappings are one-to-one and these are all distinct. So this code strictly sits outside that uniquely decodable set, but inside the non-singular set. Now we claim that the lengths here are less than or equal to minus log pi for all I. So let's prove this claim. So suppose Li is greater than minus log pi for some I. So we can rewrite this as pi greater than or equal to 2 to the minus Li. But since these P1, P2 are in this decreasing order, if pi is greater than 2 to the minus Li, everything to the left of pi will also be greater than 2 to the minus Li. So for all j less than or equal to I, pj is greater than 2 to the minus Li. So if we sum all those pj's to the left of I, j starting from 1 to I, there are I of them. If you sum them, that sum is greater than I times 2 to the minus Li. But this sum is just a part of the probabilities of the symbols. So that has to be less than or equal to 1. Now, what about this I times 2 to the minus Li? We can see from this table, we'll not give a rigorous proof, but we can look at this table and check that I times 2 to the minus Li, all of them are actually greater than or equal to 1. So we have arrived at a contradiction 1 greater than 1. So indeed Li is less than or equal to minus log pi. So therefore expectation of Li is less than or equal to expectation of minus log pi, and which is nothing but entropy h of x. So for this code, we obtained expectation of Li is to be less than or equal to h of x. So the minimum of among our all non-singular codes has to be smaller than that. So L0 of x is less than or equal to h of x. So we can actually place L0 of x to the left of h of x in this expression. So now we have more or less got the whole characterization, but for the lower bound on L0 of x. So now let's try to get a lower bound on L0 of x as well. So towards that, we will need certain properties of Shannon entropy, which we did not derive earlier. But using these definitions, these can actually be derived. So we have 0 less than or equal to h of x less than or equal to log cardinality of the alphabet. So this h of x is equal to 0 when x is a constant, and this is equal to log cardinality of x when x is uniformly distributed on the script x. Then we use a special symbol little h to denote the binary entropy, where x takes two values with probability p and 1 minus p. Then we denote the binary entropy as h of p, which is nothing but this expression itself, but written out for this two symbol alphabet. Now the joint entropy of random variables x and y is defined in this fashion. It is the expected value of log of 1 by the joint distribution. The conditional entropy of y given x is the first we calculate the conditional entropy of y for the distribution, for the conditional probability distribution p of y given x equal to little x. We calculate the entropy and then average it over all realizations little x with its probability. So expectation over that. So that is expected. That is h of y given x. So using these definitions, we can show that h of x comma y, the joint entropy, is equal to h of x plus this conditional entropy. So these two blue expressions can be derived using the definitions. So we will use this to prove a lower bound on L0 of x. So consider a non-singular code f for x. For x, let f of x be y. This be the encoding, and let us denote it by y1 through yn. So this n is random because we do not know the length, but these y1s through yns are bits. And then the average length is expectation of this n. Now we'll do the derivation on the right hand side and write the reason for each step on the left hand side. So we'll start with h of x. H of x is equal to h of phi of f of x, because for a non-singular code, phi of f of x has to be equal to x with probability 1. So this in turn is less than or equal to h of f of x. So this follows from this, which is nothing but manifestation of the chain rule itself. Now f of x is equal to y1 through yn, so we can write it in this fashion. Now again, from the step b, where we added as g of z to z, like that we can add here h of y1 through yn comma n. This also follows from the chain rule actually. Now we can apply the exact chain rule form we saw in the previous slide to obtain this. Write this as sum of these two terms, h of y1 through yn given n plus h of n. Now what is this h of y1 through yn given n? So that turns out to be nothing but probability of capital N equal to little n times the conditional entropy of y1 through yn given capital N is equal to little n. Now if you look at this term alone, h of y1 through yn given n equal to n, that is less than or equal to n. Again, this is because of because y1 through yns are all bits, and we apply chain rule to obtain this. So this h of y1 through yn given n is nothing but summation over n pn of n times n. So if we look at this closely, this is nothing but expectation of n plus h of n. So h of x is less than or equal to expectation n plus h of n. We'll carry that forward. We have obtained this. Now we can actually prove these facts. We'll not do it, but this can be done. For any positive integer valued random variable z with finite expectation, we have entropy of z is less than or equal to expectation of z times binary entropy of with parameter 1 by expectation z. So the hint to showing this is to first show that among all positive integer valued random variable z with the mean fixed to be mu, geometric random variable with parameter 1 by mu has the largest entropy. Using that, this can be shown. The next fact we'll need is this, which is that for all x, this inequality is true. Using these two facts, we can show that h of n is less than or equal to log e times 1 plus expectation of n. Just that we have to notice that this z is positive integer valued random variable, but our n can actually take values from 0 onwards, 0, 1, 2, 3. So we have to apply this fact to the random variable n plus 1. So we'll get this 1 plus this extra term here. So we have this blue expression which relates h of x to h of n and expectation n, and we have this green expression. Putting these together, we get h of x is less than or equal to expectation n plus log e times 1 plus expectation of n. Now, in case 1, say expectation of n is less than h of x. So in that case, we can take this inequality, write h of x as such, expectation n as such, but replace this expectation n with h of x because it is less than h of x. So this is true. From this, we can put a lower bound on expectation of n. Expectation of n is greater than or equal to h of x minus this term here. Now the other case is that expectation n is greater than or equal to h of x. So expectation n is greater than h of x itself. So it is also greater than or equal to h of x minus this term which is positive. So either way, expectation n is greater than or equal to h of x minus log e times 1 plus h of x. So expectation of n is the average length of a non-singular code. So the minimum average length of a non-singular code also has to satisfy this inequality. So we obtain L0 of x is greater than or equal to this. So we have shown both upper and lower bounds for L0 of x. So putting this together, we obtain this more or less complete characterization for the minimum expected lengths for non-singular codes, uniquely decodable codes, and prefix-free codes. So this brings us to the end of the discussion on lossless compression. These are a few relevant topics which we did not discuss. Huffman algorithm allows us to construct optimal prefix-free codes given the source distribution. Arithmetic coding allows us to construct the code for a sequence of symbols in an iterative fashion. Lempel-Ziv algorithm allows us to construct asymptotically optimal universal source codes. That is when the source distribution is unknown. Most of the material is from the first reference. A few parts of lossless compression, the second part of the lecture, are from the second reference. Thank you.